Today, we're going to show you 2 important Cypher setups for every map. What's going on, guys? It's your host, Sergeant Frost, and today we will be showcasing some sick Cypher setups that you can use in-game. As we move into a post-chamber nerf landscape, we felt that it may be helpful for you to brush up on your Cypher setups. We recently made a complete Cypher guide, so if you haven't already done so, make sure to watch that too. These 2 setups on Ascent will help you ascend the leaderboard and raise your elo. The first one is on from tree and should be played as a retake setup. The first step for this strong retake setup, of course, is the most exciting part, the cages. To throw these cages, position yourself into the corner and then you will see these very thin leaves. Aim at the bottom right tip of them and simply throw your cage. If done correctly, they should land on top of the light, giving you a strong one-way from grass. It will be difficult for enemies crossing to see you and potentially even expect you to be positioned where you are. The next part of this setup is the camera. Simply run backwards, jump, and spam click to place this cam. In a retake, this camera proves itself as a valuable asset, as you can see if anyone is playing heaven, around dice, and on the steps. Last but not least, place a trip for short and a trip for sight door, as this gives you the heads up if the enemies are pushing into your setup, allowing you to pop your one-way and get some freebies. This next setup is for when you want to actually hold a site. By jumping off the generator and placing your camera on the lip of this wall, you can see all of the site, including parts of hell as well as into gelato to get some early info or catch the enemy team rotating between sites. The short one-way cage in this setup is definitely more difficult than the last one. First, find this dirt texture on the ground, then aim slightly above the metal door and throw. This cage provides you with the one-way that sees the enemy's legs from dice onto short. If you are intending to use this, definitely put in some time in a custom to learn how to consistently throw this cage. I promise it is worth it. The second cage is just a standard cage from A main, which allows you to relieve some pressure and potentially stall the attackers. The first trip is for A main and it is hard for the attackers to deal with. This is because the left side is virtually impossible to break without getting caught, and you have to expose yourself to sight and short to get a glance at the other end of it. The second trip is designed to catch players running out short and trying to jump onto gen. Often the attackers will be moving too quickly to react in time to the trip, allowing you to spam the dice boxes for a freebie. And that reminds me, if you're looking to win more games and improve this act, we also offer coaching and even exclusive guides made by pros over on our website ProGuides.com. Our $8 subscription gives you access to everything, and by using our website, you'll be sure to hit a new peak in no time. Now, this camera on B is great, as not only does it spot into main, gathering crucial early information, but it also serves as a powerful retake camera, especially with the removal of the rafters above hell. This camera is in a high up position that most enemies won't be looking for, making it very hard to destroy. This camera also allows you to see deep into A main before the enemy team can spot it, so you can relay if the enemy team is showing presence or rushing the site. Let's now look at this one-way cage that allows you to see attackers' legs from rafters. As a result of this camera, you now know when the attackers have crossed into main, and therefore they could potentially be inside of the cage. Most players will be mindful of the possibility of it being a one-way, so they may not push, but for others, it may be too late to reconsider that. Add a low trip on the floor and this forces enemies to either stand still and break it, which makes them a free kill, walk into it again and be a free kill, or jump it and out of the cage, making them wait a moment before they can accurately fire. This classic A-side setup is something most day 1 players will be familiar with. This high camera allows you to see into heaven and people walking out of main. To throw this one-way, stand in this doorway, aim at this wooden beam, and throw. This one-way for main lets you shoot some toes, whilst also hopefully stalling any push. Pair it with this trip, which will catch people rushing out sight and force lurkers to make some noise, whether it's breaking it or jumping over it. The next cage is to slow down the attackers by forcing them to either respect the cage or run through, which could net you a free kill, as they will be running through not knowing what's on the other side. Pairing this with the trip should catch players who try to run you down, allowing you to spam them through the cage. That brings us to our question of the day. Today's question being, what sentinel will be more prevalent in the meta this act? Personally, I think Killjoy will be the more popular of the 3 sentinels not called Sage, as I think her Molly brings a lot of value in this current patch, especially now with less chamber mains, so players can't just run through it and TP out of it after railing your head. Enough about my thoughts though, what about yours? Let us know what you think in the comment section down below. Next up we have Fracture. This first setup is inspired by a popular Viper orb on A main, which often grinds attacking pushes to a total halt. The camera for this setup is placed above drop. Stand against this wall, aim at this metal object, jump, and place. This cam provides you with vision into A main and onto any attackers trying to sneak up drop. It can be used to pop both cages in this setup, and which is the next piece of this annoying setup. The first cage is thrown by standing in main and bouncing it onto this ledge. When triggered, it blocks off A main and gives you a partial one-way from certain positions on site to people not playing near it. Just remember that if you're trying to cross or play around the default plant spot, not only can you see enemies deep in main, but they also can see your legs. The second cage is placed on sand to try and contain the sand push. Combine this cage with the trip in front of it and you are onto a winning combo for a free kill onto a careless attacker. Similarly to the A main trip on Ascent, the main trip for this setup is difficult for the attackers to break, mainly because the ends of the trip are difficult to get a safe line of sight on. The B site setup for Fracture is also designed so that the enemy team runs into a blender of bullets. By jumping from sight, you can place your camera in this corner above Canteen, allowing you to see people coming up from arcade and out onto ramp. Another setup, another one-way. These cages are thrown from beside the base of the site, and provide a powerful position when you want to play tower with them. If you play high enough on the steps, it can be impossible for the enemies running into the cage to see you, often giving you a free kill and leaving them frustrated. And last but not least, let's talk about the trips. There is nothing fancy with these trips. The first is to catch players running out of main. Make sure you don't place it too close to the edge of the corner of the wall, as attackers who shift walked up will be able to see it before the push commences. The second is designed to catch players who jump onto site, allowing smoked off players from Canteen or Gen to shoot them. Where better to start on Haven than in Heaven? This camera allows you to watch for players that walk out long and also have a deep angle into short, allowing you to see almost all of it and relay information to your team early. The whole idea of this setup is to spam enemies from Heaven, so of course there's going to be a one-way involved. To throw this, line yourself up with this dark piece of wood, set the bottom of your HUD through the corner of the map on the wall and throw. This provides you with an OP one-way that shows enemies as far away as the long orb with them having no chance to see you. The trips in this setup are to catch enemies that walk onto site, as you already have info deep, short, and long because of your camera, and trap them for you to shoot through a cage. Place one on short box and then one on wooden box by long. By placing them far back, this can deceive enemies into thinking there is no trip there at all, and encourage them into running straight into sight and into the one-way. This setup is best used when retaking or when the enemy team's controller player is dead. One of the most important areas to hold on Haven is Garage. Lose Garage and the attacks can easily split B, push spawn, and of course split C site. That's why it is important to at the very least have a trip on it or have eyes on it, so why not do both? The camera for this setup is placed high on the wall and in front of the platform. Simply jump and click high up so you can see into cubby and deep long and anyone walking out of Garage on the C site. Next you'll need your cages, with the first being one to stop attackers swarming out of Garage to split you, and the second one being a one-way cage for people walking out long when you play logs or in some cases on platform. Last but not least, your trusty trips. The first is a simple trip to catch people trying to push into Garage, and the second is to get info on people walking out long, and to highlight enemies that try to run through your cage. Lotus is the newest map in Valorant, so let's keep it simple. This first setup is for the A bomb site. Place a trip for the revolving door. Although the doors are deafening when they open, people can play mind games and press the button without actually going in. And as an added bonus, whenever they do walk in, they'll feel pressured to go a bit faster, so it's more likely to get tripped. The second trip is an angular wire off this small wooden box. This catches players trying to run towards HUD. The camera is placed into A main for early information as well as to hold A link and A stairs. Last but not least, the cages are placed on HUD and beside the wooden box to close off some angles when the enemy team are pushing, so that way you can buy more time for your team to rotate and to isolate enemies. The C site setup is far more exciting than its A site counterpart. You guessed it, it's time for another one-way. Line up with this line, aim at this brick, and simply throw the cages. These will give you a nasty one-way onto enemies crossing towards water. Place the spy cam on the flowers above main, which will let you pop the cages based off the info of it. Last but not least, the first trip is for early info on players walking onto site, and the second is to catch players running into the cage so you can hunt them down through the cage. For Pearl, we have an A wallbang setup. The first setup on Pearl is designed to utilize the paper-thin walls on back sight. This camera backside allows you to see almost all of it, and it allows you to wallbang enemies when they stand still to remove the newly lodged dart on them. This trip is placed to catch players crossing the cubby, while the second one is meant to catch people sprinting in to plant the bomb, which is also extremely wallbangable through the half wall. The cages placed on A main and art stairs are going to act as smokes, which will hopefully slow down the attackers and buy your team some time to rotate. This B-hall setup allows you to spray through your cages for some easy kills. This one-way cage is pretty forgiving, but it can still take an attempt or two to throw before you perfect it. By combining it with this trip, you can get some easy kills on players running through it and revealing them for you to run around the corner and mow down. The camera in the hallway allows you to see long as well as alley. The second cage is to allow you to pop out of halls and spray anyone caught on this second tripwire. All in all, it's a lot of spamming through cages, so you better have a phantom. When you think of Cypher, you probably don't think of Icebox. To make Cypher somewhat work on this map, you need to be creative and unorthodox. This B bomb site setup is designed to help you retake with this camera that sees back yellow as parts of default. Simply stand on these boxes and jump to place it. Next, the cages. The first cage is designed to allow you to see the feet of anyone playing wide on the container, whilst also allowing you to move up more safely. Using the one-way with the camera can definitely catch some enemies out. The second cage is just a simple cage that shuts out the line of sight from long, allowing you to move around site with more safety and rotate in through snowman without being held by an operator. The trips for this setup are one from the cross from yellow, which should catch players trying to run from long to sight, and then one deeper on long that you can place at the start of the round. This trip gives you info that players are pushing long. A side is where the next Icebox setup is. Let's start off with the cages. Place one on top of 410, so that way it gives you a one-way to look onto the enemy's legs, and then place your second cage on top of screens. This allows you to escape if you find yourself in a sticky situation. This camera should be placed above pipes from screens, as it allows you to give a good overview of the front of sight, 410, and the orb. Finally, the trip should be placed with one to hold the 410 push and the other for default. Remember how we said you have to get creative to make Cypher work on Icebox? This setup certainly won't be used in any pro game anytime soon, but it's unorthodox enough that it can work for at least a round or two. At this point, you either switch it up and try another trip cage play, or a similar one from a different angle, or perhaps it's enough that they avoid you entirely. Well folks, that's all for our Cypher setups. What agent do you want us to show utility for next? Let us know in the comment section down below. If you like this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to subscribe. This has been Sergeant Frost, and good luck on the grind in the new episode.